Hello and welcome back to Quilts Bloom at Dawn. Well, it's official. I am finally in my new quilt room, and this is the first video that I'm recording in this room. So I'm so excited to be here doing this with you today. Of course, we're definitely going to be taking a closer look together in a few minutes. Now, I still have a few more touches before it's officially complete, but it's functional, and I've had so much fun this week officially getting moved into this location, organizing everything, so I'm excited to show it to you today. I did want to go ahead and take a moment and just tell you a little bit about the quilts that are hanging. It's definitely important that my room had a design wall, but to be honest, what I'm utilizing as my design wall, while it's very functional, it's just not very pretty unless you have something up there. So I wanted to come up with a way I could have a design wall, but not necessarily always have the design wall on display. So I decided to just go ahead and hang a quilt in front of the design wall. So this quilt, which is just hanging on clips, can actually be slid to one side or the other, so I could actually use my design wall. I'll show that in a little more detail when we take a tour of the room. But I did want to go ahead and mention that the quilt that's hanging is actually the 2024 Designer Mystery Block of the Month from Fat Quarter Shop. Of course, last week I showed you my progress for my 2025 Mystery Block of the Month, but this is actually the completed one from 2024, and it's the one that's using Bunny Hill Designs, her beautiful My Summer House collection, and I just love the setting, especially with a finishing kit that turned those blocks into beautiful houses. I love this quilt, so I decided to go ahead and showcase this quilt for February. You'll also notice I have a quilt ladder in the corner, and this is actually what I did on National Jelly Roll Day. It was a pattern from Fat Quarter Shop called Strippy Spools using a jelly roll, and this is made using Camille Ross Kelly's beautiful summertime collection. I actually also have my Winter Birds quilt in the other corner of my room, but we'll take a closer look at that when we go on a tour. In addition to the tour, we have so much to get through today. The first thing you'll notice is I have all of my blocks for the Blueprint Quilt complete, and I am ready to go ahead and lay this out on the design wall today. In addition to that, we're going to go ahead and work on a block for our Norway quilt. Last week we focused on making all of our cuts for this quilt, and today we're going to go ahead and make one of these large blocks. It's actually 4 identical blocks that we put together to make this very large block. So we'll be working on making one of these together today, and this is so easy to make. You're going to love it. You'll also notice that I have a few blocks here on display along with my Barnstar book. This is actually a project that I started last year in hopes of completing it in 2025. I was able to get all of the larger blocks and the 16-inch blocks. I was able to get all of that done. However, I still had all of the 8-inch and 4-inch blocks to complete. So over the past week, I have been very busy. In addition to setting up this room, I was able to go ahead and finish out all of my 8-inch blocks. So I thought I'd take a few minutes just to show you those blocks. I'm really not using any certain collection. This is one where I'm literally going to my stash. I'm using some scraps, some fat quarters, some yardage, whatever I think works. It's definitely fun and easy to take a single collection and make a whole quilt. But it's also fun to take a pattern like this that's just full of fabrics and completely come up with your own look using your own fabrics. You know it's going to be one of a kind. So I thought I would just show you those blocks today. So let's get started. So I'm so excited to share my room with you that I decided I'm going to do the tour first today. So we took one of our empty bedrooms. I believe it's either 10 or 11 feet by 13 feet. We basically turned it into my quilt room. I've become so accustomed to the sewing cabinet and the table that I had in the multi-purpose location that I've been using as a quilting space that I decided I really wanted to try to replicate that as much as possible. I really like that system. When I was growing up, my grandmother had a sewing room, and I used to love when I'd pull up to her house, I could see her through the window sitting at her sewing machine. Well, I didn't realize it. My own sewing room is set up so similar to what she had. I always loved that her sewing machine was right there in front of the window, and I love to have the sunshine coming in. So that's where I decided to go ahead and put my sewing machine cabinet. My sewing machine cabinet does not have a lot of storage, but it does have this one cabinet here And I'm able to keep all of my sewing machine supplies, the instruction manual. I use one of these art bin boxes for just more supplies for my sewing machine. And then I have a little tray of tools that I can grab when I need them. I also love utilizing baskets. Now this is a basket that you'd normally use in your kitchen for silverware, but it's also a great idea for a sewing room, a quilt room, a craft room. So I just have all of my different marking pens separated, along with a few extra rulers. And it's right here handy by my feet. I can grab it when I need it. In addition to that, I have a whole basket of alpha clippies that I can grab when I'm cutting a new project. I have it right there handy when I need it. After quilting in a pretty confined area, I definitely appreciate having a little bit more space to work. So I purposely tried to keep this area as open as possible. That way when I'm actually sewing a whole quilt together or doing the actual quilting, I have some room to spread out. This little cart that I purchased, I actually got it on Amazon, but they have something very similar from IKEA. It's called the Alex. The only thing is this one was about half the price and it got really good reviews. Of course, I've only had it a short time, but my husband said it was easy to put together and it's very sturdy. Now it is a rolling cart, which is great. Now I don't think I'll be rolling it around much, but it does have that feature if that's something you're looking for. And of course it has a cabinet here, and inside I've gone on ahead and put a couple baskets that I happen to already have. This first basket is filled with all of my foundation paper piecing supplies. I'm using them more and more often. Matter of fact, in a few minutes we'll be looking at those Barn Star blocks that I just made, those 8-inch blocks. And when I was making those, every opportunity that I could pull from my foundation paper, I did. This second basket is just full of a variety of templates. The periwinkle, triangle shapes, just unusual shapes, that would be here. Now obviously all of my traditional rectangles and squares, all of those are right here on the Fat Quarter Shop ruler racks. I love these, of course, because they're blue and pretty, but you can definitely get these wooden ruler racks a number of places. But I do love the functionality of having all of these on display right here. When I'm piecing, I can just grab what I need easily and keep going. Now you notice this also has 5 drawers. These drawers, again, they're very sturdy, they're well made, they glide easily. You can just grab the drawer itself. It has this little cutout, so it's so nice. In the first drawer, I have all of my neutral thread, and I did get these little acrylic bins. I am not even sure where I got these, probably from TJ Maxx, someplace like that. You can pretty much find these just about anywhere, either office supply, kitchen supplies. Certainly Amazon has things like this. It's just so nice to have a variety of those little containers to organize your drawers. I have another drawer of just all of my colored threads. It's not nearly as neat as the first one with the bins, but I was able to fit all of my threads here. Now the next drawer utilizes more of those little storage containers, and this is a great one. I love this container, but this has all of my cutting supplies, my scissors, rotary cutters, all of my refill blades. So basically just anything with a blade is going to be in this drawer. The next drawer is really nothing pretty. It does have another one of those acrylic bins, and it just holds a variety of notions. And then finally I have the drawer of my large spools. This thread is what I really use most often. I try to keep a white, and this is Aurifil 2024. I have a very light gray. This is Aurifil 2600. I have an off-white Aurifil 2311. And then one more sort of a cream neutral, and that's Aurifil 2000. I use these not only for piecing, but also for machine quilting. I absolutely love using these. As much as I quilt, you'd be surprised at how quickly I actually do go through these large spools. I also have just a couple more notions back here, my fabric markers, so just a variety of things. I'll include a link in the description for this. Again, I did find it on Amazon. And when you think of all the quilting supplies that I was able to organize and store inside and on top, it was definitely a great purchase for my room. So that first area that we looked at, I would call that my sewing station. Well, this is what I'd call my pressing station. My original plan was to have my full-size ironing board set up in here, as well as just a small pressing station near me. However, I ended up going with a completely different idea, and that is thanks to one of the comments that I received on one of my previous videos. When I was describing the table that I was looking to get, one of you mentioned that you'd purchased an adjustable table from Home Depot. So I ended up looking into that a little bit more, and it turns out it's these Husky tables, which I had actually learned about quite a while ago and sort of forgot about it. But as I began to look at this idea again, I realized that this Husky table would actually be suitable for all of my pressing needs. This particular Husky table is 24 inches by 52 inches. So it's good depth as well as plenty long. However, they do come in different lengths. There's one that's a little bit smaller than this one, and then there's a couple more that are larger than this one. I think it goes up to 72 inches long. If you have not checked these out at Home Depot and you're looking for either a table or a pressing area, I cannot recommend this enough. This solid wood top is so heavy and durable. I ended up purchasing a larger wool mat, but I did go ahead and get a silicone mat to put under it just to protect the table from any heat. This wool mat that I purchased is a 24 by 36 inches. So it's definitely plenty large enough not only for me to use for small pressing, but also to press a large quilt. One of the things that I really appreciate about using this Husky table as a pressing station is the fact that it is so much deeper. Instead of having a very narrow ironing board, you just expanded your pressing surface by so much. Another great thing about this is because this Husky table has wheels, you can literally just bring it right up to a table and spread your whole quilt across your table as well as this. So your quilt is not dragging on the floor or being pulled. It just makes it so much easier to work with. Now, the other amazing thing about this is that it is height adjustable, and it's currently in its lowest setting. So basically right now it's like short table height. It has a crank for you to go ahead and raise it up, and it goes up pretty high. Now I will tell you, it's a little bit noisy. The instructions say that is normal, but it isn't pleasant. But I'll go ahead and crank it up just so you can see how high. Okay, so this is as high as the table goes, which is pretty high. Definitely as short as I am. I will never use it this tall. But the fact that it's this versatile makes it such a great addition to a quilt room. The great thing about this hand crank is you're able to just slide it back in. When you're ready to raise or lower it, you just pull it out and then you crank it. Another advantage of this table is the fact that it does have some storage. Now these are fairly shallow drawers, but they're large drawers, so I'm able to hold a lot. So this first drawer right on top is all of my quilting supplies, things that I'm going to use for either quilting or pressing, right here on top in this first drawer. Then it has a second identical drawer, again fairly shallow, but it is enough for you to keep, again, a few of your notions, some items that you want to have handy. Last thing I wanted to mention about this table that I see as a real advantage, because it has the wheels and it's fairly easy to move around. In addition to being able to maneuver large quilts on this and being able to move in front or behind it, the other advantage is I can just push this out of the room if I need a little bit more space. And behind that quilt is my design wall. Now, I don't use my design wall every day, so on those occasions when I'm ready to use the design wall, I'll just slide this out, move my quilt to the side, and have my design board ready to use. In just a few minutes, we'll be actually using that design wall to lay out the Blueprint quilt. So we'll be able to take a closer look at that in just a few minutes. All right, now we're looking at the quilt room from a different angle. Of course, you've already seen my Billy bookshelves. I've done a couple videos where I've highlighted them, and of course the organization system for fabrics. The only new thing I wanted to mention about those is the fact that I got those little Edison lights. Now I have to tell you, I got that idea from my brother, and he had just gotten a row of those lights for his bookshelves in his home. When I saw what he had done, I knew I had to do the same thing here with all of my fabric, because there's one thing you want lots of in a quilt room, and that is light. So I had to really search to get those Edison lights that were short enough to accommodate that space. The only ones that I could find were black in color, which just really did not go with my quilt room. I ended up getting an aerosol can of Rust-Oleum chalk paint, and I believe the color was called Harbor Blue. I just spray painted those. And I absolutely love the look of it as well as the extra light that it provides. So at this point, that's really the only new addition. I do still have a couple more things coming just to decorate those top shelves. But other than that, the bookshelves are complete. You'll also notice that I decided to go ahead and bring my winter birds quilt in here to enjoy as well. I don't think you can have too many quilts in a quilt room, right? All right, the last thing to show you in my quilt room, and the thing that took the longest to arrive, is my table. This is really just a dining table, and it looks fairly similar to what I've been using in my dining room. So this table is about 40 inches wide by 72 inches long. So this is a good sized table. It provides plenty of work area. And as you can see, this does take up a lot of the space in my quilt room. But I absolutely love having a large table to work at. Now, I probably looked at least 100 tables before I decided on this one. And one of the reasons this one stood out was the fact that this one had drawers, 3 drawers on each side. And I absolutely love it. They're nice and sturdy. They're felt lined. And I cannot get over how functional it is. This particular drawer is the essential tools that I'm probably going to be pulling from the most. It's just the things that you need to be able to grab, but you don't necessarily want all of that on display. This second drawer are the things that I need when I'm actually sewing. Extra bobbins, a whole bag of machine needles, and even some things for when I'm cleaning my machine. So it's just things that I want to have handy, but it's all related to my machine. You see, I still have an extra drawer on this side, and I have 3 more drawers on that side. So there is so much storage. So in addition to having a large surface to work at, I also have lots of storage. All right, so this is the last thing to show you, and that of course is the design wall. So as you can see, I was able to just slide that husky right outside the door. So I have all this extra space to work at the design wall. I was able to just slide my quilt right over. Of course, I have something pretty when I don't have anything on my design wall. Yet behind that quilt, this is very functional. So we just took those same boards that I've been using for my design wall, which is just basically those large insulation boards that you would put on a home. They're very lightweight. We took those and covered them with batting. And then my husband took some Velcro tabs. So if I really wanted to, I could take these off. But really the only reason I would take these off would be to recover them. So that completes the tour of my quilt room, and I hope that I've been able to share some ideas that you can incorporate into your space. The one thing I've learned is that quilters do a really good job of taking whatever space they have available and making it work. But I hope a few of the ideas that I've shared that I'm utilizing in my space will help you in yours. Now that this design wall is visible, it's a good time for us to go ahead and lay out the blocks for our blueprint quilt. So the blueprint quilt is one we've been working on for a while, and it is in the book Celebrate with Quilts by Lisa Alexander and Susan Aki. And if you're following along with me, we are on page 105, and there you can see the block layout. So I'm going to go ahead and take a few minutes and get my blocks up, and then we'll take a look together. Gone on ahead and laid out all of my blueprint blocks. This pattern is really meant to be a mix of your own ideas along with her blocks. So you can either follow her layout, which is on page 105 and Celebrate with Quilts, or come up with your own layout, which is what I did. I made a lot of extra blocks in hopes of having enough leftover blocks to make a second smaller quilt. So I had a lot of flexibility regarding which blocks I used where. Now, if you notice the mosaic tile blocks, I had a number of those, and I really just did those in an X format, and I really built everything around that. And as much as I like a scrappy quilt, I don't like it to be too busy, so I did use a number of just solid squares to break up those pieced blocks if needed. The beauty of being able to put it on a design wall is you do have that opportunity to just step back and really get that overall picture. And I absolutely encourage you to take a few pictures as you're going through and study it. I can't tell you how many times I tweak it, because what I think might look good when I'm looking at it, when I look at it in a picture, I end up not liking it. So I played with it for quite a while to finally get a layout that was comfortable for me. So there's really no set layout. Really, this is your choice. So just have fun with this process. So the pattern actually calls for 6 across and 7 down. You'll notice that mine is 7 across and 8 down. So I did make mine slightly larger than what the pattern called for. I don't plan to add any sort of a border. All I'm going to do now is take these rows down, sew them together, and then quilt and bind it. Hopefully I'll have this quilt to show you very soon because I'd really love to be able to enjoy it while it's so cold outside. Okay, so one of the great things about quilting is you have the freedom to make changes throughout the entire process. And I just made a couple changes. I actually ended up deciding to switch out some of these solid blocks that I had throughout. I had them in some of those pastel colors. The more I began to look at it for what I'm intending to use this quilt for, I really began to think I like a deeper color for those solids. So I just went on ahead and switched out all of these lighter blocks that I had throughout the quilt. I switched them out and I just tried some of those extra 10-inch squares that I had. I decided to just put those up there and to see how I like that in comparison. And after snapping a few shots of that, the more I look at it for what I'm intending to use this quilt for, this is actually going to achieve that look that I'm going for more so than this. Now, I still love using these soft pastels within the blocks, but to break that up and to bring this quilt out a little bit more, I decided to switch it out with some of the blocks from the Stormy Seas layer cake. I still had plenty, so I just switched those out, and I really like this look a little bit better. Now, this is definitely a change from the direction I thought I was going to go, but that sometimes happens. When you lay things out, sometimes it doesn't look quite like you intended. And that's one of the beauties of quilting, is you can be creative all the way till the end. So if you don't like something, switch it up. Now, I do still plan to use all of these blocks that I already have cut, but what I'm thinking I'll do now is use more of these blocks along with some of the extra blocks that I already had cut. I think I'll still go ahead and make a smaller quilt. So I'll definitely still utilize these, but just not necessarily on this quilt. So I just wanted to share this update with you because it's definitely a change. But I'm actually glad this happened so that we could go through this process of just switching things up, and it completely changed my quilt. Well, we are ready to go ahead now and make one of our Norway blocks together. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is actually 4 blocks that are put together. So basically, if you notice, this block starts here and goes to the end. In between, you have this sashing running this way and this way. So that's where we'll take those 4 blocks that we're going to make and put them all together to make this one large block. So let's get started. If you're just joining us, we're making the Norway quilt. That's from Thimble Blossoms by Camille Ross Kelly. And this is a quilt that I've wanted to make for quite a while. And with the bitter cold outside, now was the perfect time to make it. This is actually a really easy quilt to make. It's made up of nothing but squares and rectangles. Matter of fact, what I have laid out right here is everything we need to make 4 identical small blocks that will join together with that sashing. You notice it's just squares and various sizes of these rectangles. That's it. So this is going to go together so quickly. As far as the layout, I ended up going with all of these blues against this white background, and then I have this aqua as my accent. She has a similar layout on the pattern on the back, or you could go for something more colorful, and this would be beautiful as well. Now, this pattern is available as a PDF, which is what I have. I just downloaded it. Or you can purchase an actual pattern from her website, Thimble Blossoms, or it may be available at your favorite quilting store. I know for a fact it's available at Fat Quarter Shop. Once you have the pattern, if you look on page 2, she provides the block assembly. It's so well written. She has pictures to show you exactly what you're going to need. So I've gone on ahead and laid out all the pieces according to her instructions on page 2. To make 4 small blocks, which we'll end up putting together with this sashing to make that large block, just like the one we just looked at. From the background, you'll want to go ahead and gather a total of 6 of the squares, and obviously 6 times 4, so we'll need 24 of the small squares. We'll need 3 of these medium rectangles, and so 3 times 4, that'll be a total of 12 of those. And then the larger rectangles, we'll need just 1 for each block, so a total of 4 of those. For your primary print, you'll need a total of 6 of these strips for each of those small blocks, so a total of 24. From your accent color, you'll need 1 square for each, so a total of 4, and 1 small rectangle, a total of 4. So we're going to start with these pieces, and then we're just going to keep building out from there. So you'll notice it's all of the aqua pieces, so the rectangular aqua, the square aqua, and then your background square. We're going to go ahead and gather these things, and obviously you'll need 4 of each of these since we're going to make 4 identical units. The first thing we're going to go ahead and do is just sew these squares together. And again, I'll be doing this with a 1/4 inch seam, so I'll get that sewn together and pressed. All right, I was able to get those sewn together, and you'll notice I do have all of these pressed going towards the darker fabric. The next step is we'll go ahead and sew this unit together. All right, so all 4 of these units are done. And if you notice, I did go ahead and press it again towards the aqua. And you notice I've gathered several pieces here. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is sew these medium rectangles to this side right here. The next thing we'll go ahead and do is add another background strip. This is the larger rectangle. Then we'll be ready to go ahead and add the primary print to this side. So I'm going to go ahead and work on adding this piece first, then this one, and then this one. Of course, as I sew this together, I will be pressing each one of these before I add the next strip. So I'm going to go ahead and get all 3 of these pieces added in this order: the medium rectangle, the larger rectangle background, and then our primary print. And then we'll take a look. Okay, I was able to get all 3 of those pieces. So you'll notice there's the medium background, the larger background rectangle, and our print. And I did go ahead and press all of those going towards those units that we were just adding, just to reduce bulk. That made the most sense. So we're ready to keep building out. The next thing you'll need is another strip of your primary print along with the square background. And we'll go ahead and sew these together, and then we're going to sew it right along here at the bottom. Okay, so I went on ahead and sewed this together, but I did just want to show you that I did go ahead and press this going towards the dark fabric, because this is pressed going towards the dark fabric, and that way this will nest nicely when we sew this together like this. The other thing is you will want to go ahead, on everything else I haven't pinned. However, whenever I'm joining 2 seams like this, I always grab my pins. So I want to go ahead and just use that polka pin method and get that nested nicely. So I'll go ahead and get the rest of these done, and we'll take a look. All right, our little small units are starting to come together. We're ready to go ahead and build out again. So we'll want to go ahead and take 4 more of our background squares, 4 more of our primary prints, sew those together. Those are going to go along the side. Once we complete that, we're going to go ahead and make this bottom strip. Again, it's the primary print in the center with the squares sewn on either side. And then we'll go ahead and add this whole unit. So first I'm going to go ahead and sew all my strips together. Then I'll be ready to go ahead and build onto my block. All right, so I've gone on ahead and sewed this side panel on. It really didn't matter how you press this one, so I did press it to the dark side. However, on this it did matter. So you will want to make sure, because you're going to be joining this seam right here, you will want to go ahead and make sure that since this is pressed towards the dark side here, you go ahead and press this towards the dark side as well. So that way that'll nest nicely when we sew it together. So I'll go ahead and work on getting all of these sewn and pressed, and we'll take a look. All right, we're getting pretty close. One thing I did want to mention, it really helps if you just remember to keep this aqua in the left corner as you're building this out, just so you're able to keep the right orientation throughout. So we are ready to go ahead and add our last side strip, and then finally our last strip across the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and join our medium background rectangle to the primary print, and then I'll go ahead and sew the background square and another medium background rectangle to the last 4 primary strips for this row. And then I'll go ahead and get all of this pressed and sewn together, and we'll take a look. All right, the 4 sections of our block are now complete. So I'm going to set these aside so we can go ahead and make the sashing strips. So to make the sashing strips, we'll need a total of 2 of the square aqua pieces, 1 of the largest aqua rectangles, and a total of 4 of the largest background rectangles. We'll assemble our sashing pieces just like this. So we'll make one of these long strips with the aqua rectangle in the center, surrounded by the 2 large background rectangles. And then you'll make 2 more sashing pieces identical. So just the aqua square and again, that largest background rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and get all of this sewn together. All right, so once we have our sashing pieces sewn together, we're ready to go ahead and connect those. So we'll start with these smaller sashing units. We'll go ahead and connect these 2 smaller sashing units. I've got 2 of these stacked here. We'll go ahead and connect those to the block sections. So I'll go ahead and sew this together. Now I did go ahead and press this going towards the aqua again, so this will nest nicely when we sew this together. So I'll go ahead and get both of these sewn together, so I'll end up with 2 sections when I get this sewn together. So you will want to just make sure that you have your orientation right. So if you notice, I have the aqua in the corner here and the aqua in the corner here, and that way you just make sure you connect the right things. All right, we are down to our final seam that we need to make, and that is, of course, sewing this sashing between these 2 sections, the final 2 sections. So I will go ahead and get that sewn and pressed, and we'll take a final look at our block. Before I go sew this on, I did just want to mention you will want to go ahead on this aqua. Make sure you do match up these seams just to make sure it aligns nicely. So you don't need to necessarily pin the whole thing, although it certainly would help, but I would at least pin this aqua and certainly where those seams come together, and that way everything will align nicely. So I'll go get this sewn and pressed and we'll take a look. All right, our final block is done. And look at that, it's a very large block, too large to even show it on the whole screen. So this quilt is just 9 of these blocks put together. There's nothing extra, no border, just make 9 blocks just like we just did. Sew those together and it's ready to be quilted and bound. So I'll definitely be working this week on making my remaining Norway blocks. Hopefully I'll have all the blocks together to take a look at next week. Well, the last thing that I wanted to share with you before we close today is one more project that I've really been working on trying to finish up this week. And that, of course, is my Barn Star sampler. I started this early last year. I believe I started it like in January of last year with the intention of having it done in 2025. Well, that didn't happen, but I'm determined I will finish this quilt before I take on any more major projects. And I'm actually getting pretty close. So I had already made all of the 24-inch blocks. These are the very large blocks. I had made those early on in the year. So these are all done, and I've even shared them on a previous video. I even have all of my 16-inch blocks made, and it's a lot of them. So I've actually made a lot of progress on this project. However, that's as far as I got. I still had my 8-inch blocks and my 4-inch blocks that I had not even started. So my goal for this past week was to make my 8-inch block. I finally finished. So I thought I'd just show these to you and tell you a little bit about my strategy for taking on this project. So this is another example of one where I didn't start with a collection. I literally just pulled from my own fabrics. I used some yardage, some fat quarters, some smaller pieces and scraps. Basically, I just chose whatever I thought would complement the colors that I was trying to achieve. My goal was to make mine look similar to hers. I did make a couple variations. If there was a color that I just didn't love, I would substitute another color that I felt like would complement and be something that I would appreciate. So when I made my 8-inch blocks, basically you made 3 of each one, and I just had fun. I love just going into my stash, get creative, and just come up with my own design. And I love to take a center like that and highlight a special fabric. So you can see I just used a variety. I couldn't even tell you what all of these are. I know some of them, but not all of them. But I just had fun. I do know this is actually a Corey Yoder fabric right here. I know I can spot some of Camille's fabrics in this one. This one has some Lori Holt, along with just some other fabrics that I've picked up along the way. Matter of fact, this one that's sort of like this gray, it was leftover backing from a project. So don't underestimate the value of extra backing. This is actually a camille fabric, and this is actually a yoder fabric. So you can see I just had fun pulling from different things. So this is another fun one. This was actually a fat quarter that was given to me, and I had so much fun just highlighting that in the center. Now I did want to also mention, and I shared this earlier, but as I made these blocks, if it was a standard size for the half square triangle, square and a square, or flying geese, I definitely went on ahead and took advantage of my foundation paper, pulled out what I needed, and made sure that my cuts were made according to the directions on the foundation paper. And the blocks just came out so perfectly when you use that foundation paper. I'm definitely getting more and more sold on that foundation paper, and I'm finding myself looking for opportunities to use it. And this last one is just another one that I believe this was actually a yoder. This was actually a Lori Holt, and I couldn't even tell you where I got this yellow, but it was bright and cheery, and it gave the look that I needed to achieve with this block. So I just wanted to show you how much fun you can have when you just play with your own fabrics. As much as I love to get collections, and it certainly makes it easier, at some point we actually have to use the fabrics that we have. And I love the opportunity, the challenge, and the creative freedom that I have when I can pull my own fabric and create a one-of-a-kind quilt. My goal is definitely to continue making the remaining blocks. All I have left is my 4-inch blocks. However, I definitely want to go ahead and finish out this Norway quilt first, but I'm hoping maybe I'll have enough time to do at least a few of them. Hopefully, I will be showing you my 4-inch blocks soon. And I encourage you, if you have those unfinished quilts, those ones that you really wanted to finish, but other things just get piled on top of it, I encourage you to pull them out, make the time, and make them a priority. Before you know it, you'll have more quilts made. Well, we definitely covered a lot today. Of course, we did the tour of the quilt room. We were able to go over some tips for the Blueprint Quilt layout. Made one of those large Norway quilt blocks together, and we had a chance to look at an unfinished project, and hopefully we're all motivated to finish our UFOs. Well, I thank you so much for joining me today, and if you're enjoying these videos, I encourage you to like, subscribe, and I love reading your comments. Until next time, happy quilting.